Oh, I am yawning this morning. Hello, Courtney.
Good morning. You need to
Good
start
morning.
getting your coffee in you. Like we need to start working on our timing of coffee
Yes.
intake.
I need an IV drip. It should be an IV drip of coffee right into my veins, and that'll like
I
wake
think
me
that
up
would
there.
maybe wake you up, maybe be dangerous and not
Might
probably.
be. It really might be. It really might be.
Okay, so I know you've got somebody really interesting lined up for me to chat with today.
Yes, I do.
I'm super excited.
I'm actually excited. I actually might not even need all of my coffee because this guy is really good. So I'm gonna read a little bit of his bio here.
Yeah.
Well, he has a book coming out. So let me
Okay.
just read some of his book hype, and I'm gonna do it in my NPR voice.
Ooh, okay. Very
Yes.
intellectual. Okay.
So his book is called The End of Jobs: The Rise of On-Demand Workers and Agile Corporations. As the robots rise, we are faced with the end of jobs, but not in the way you might think. The world has witnessed three step functions in technological change: mechanization, electrification, and computerization. These industrial revolutions led to massive increases in productivity, and thus we need far fewer workers. With each of these technological breakthroughs, the power balance between companies and workers shifted heavily to companies. The abuses of that power by companies instigated employee unrest and sometimes even armed uprising. Counterbalancing forces rose to constrain companies' power, eventually prompting unions, regulation, and the social safety net to bring stability to the relationship. As we enter the fourth great leap forward in technology with robots and AI, we face the first services revolution. The power balance will again shift massively to companies as new technologies drive productivity increases in the service industry, much as the last three industrial revolutions transformed manufacturing. What lessons can we learn? Transformed manufacturing. What lessons can we learn from the past three industrial revolutions and the current state of the labor market? How will we renegotiate the social contract to ensure fairness for workers, set clear rules for companies, and provide stability for society? What is the future of work? Dun, 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 dun.
Ooh, I like it though, because it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a history lesson.
Yeah, seems that way.
And then also a little bit of like future thinking. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be good. I like it. I'm super excited to
Ooh.
chat with Jeff.
Let's
So
get
do
into it. Let's do this. You are listening to TribePod, a podcast series of interviews of interest to the HR community. It is hosted by Courtney Lane, produced by Jim Stroud, sponsored by Proactive Talent, and enjoyed by you. Today's episode begins.
Employer branding is all about getting your message and your story in front of the right audience. It's a lot to manage, and what Proactive Talent does for our clients is we help centralize, so you have one partner, one vendor to help you manage all those relationships. And not only that, we help you track the effectiveness of every media dollar you spend on hiring, so that you know in real time that you're getting the greatest ROI for your marketing investment to attract great talent into your company. We help our clients with recruitment marketing in a couple ways. One is in recruitment marketing strategy. And with that, we really take the time to help you build the right strategy, and then we get mutual approval on that strategy before you spend a single dime. The other way we do this is through our agency of record service. This is a partnership with you where we're able to reach out to publishers on your behalf to negotiate better pricing, to execute on media campaigns, and really act as an extension of your team. Some of the benefits that our clients have seen working with Proactive Talent's recruitment marketing services is an overall reduction of 30% cost per applicant. That's really significant. It's showing that we're able to leverage great technology, programmatic, and we're also flexible and scalable. We're platform agnostic. We're always going to use whatever the greatest and latest technology is, whatever the best platforms are to help create efficiencies in your media purchasing so that you're always on the cutting edge.
For more information on Proactive Talent, visit them online at proactivetalent.com or click the link in the podcast description.
So today I'm joined by entrepreneur Jeff Wald, author of The End of Jobs, The Rise of On-Demand Workers and Agile Corporations. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jeff.
Courtney, thank you for having me.
So just to start things off, tell folks Agile Corporations. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jeff.
Courtney, thank you for having me.
So just to start things off, tell folks about your book and sort of what inspired you to even write it in the first place.
Well, I will tell you, as an entrepreneur in the space, I was getting a little frustrated with the kind of lack of discipline in people making predictions about the future of work. You know, you'd hear things like, oh, I think 50% of workers are going to work remote in the next 10 years. And you're like, really? Because the natural limit of the economy is 42% of workers could work remote. Like, did you look at any data before you made that prediction? And so I started writing a book to put in place a framework for thinking about how we make predictions about the future. And that framework is pretty simple. You know, we should study the past, and we should think about the data and how data has trended, because data trends tend to follow, because, you know, we stand on the precipice of a very big change in the way the world works with robots and AI. And because of the beginning of this change, we have, you know, people predicting, oh my gosh, it's the end of jobs and all the jobs are going to be taken by robots and AI. And the reality is we've gone through technological step functions like this before. And so as we think about how we predict how robots and AI are going to impact the world of work, I think it's super important to look at history and how companies and workers have adapted in the past, how society has adapted in the past, to periods where productivity increases have been so large that they have caused the fear of the end of jobs. And so that was kind of the impetus in writing the book.
Great. Do you find that fear, has heightened with we're in now, or, with the pandemic and the economy in the state that it is now? Is that fear going to feel heightened for individuals, or is it almost helping move us along?
It's a really great question. So look, obviously there are a lot of fears right now that are heightened, and there are a lot of trends in the future of work that are accelerating. I'm not sure that the trend on robots and AI is accelerating just yet. And so I don't know that any fear that people had, and certainly as with every prediction or every technological step function in the past, there are no shortage of people predicting, the end of jobs. And the title of my book was really meant to be ironic, because I don't believe that there are going to be a huge number of job losses because of robots and AI. And we can talk about that in a moment, but to stay with your question, the fear that this pandemic would cause people to speed up the use of robotic process automation software or AI software in the workplace, would speed up the presence of robots in a retail environment, in a leisure environment, in a restaurant environment. That is a real concern, because you can see people thinking, oh, well, robots don't get sick, so companies are going to want to, have more robots. If their stores were entirely robotic, they'd be able to be open right now. Well, maybe, but you also appreciate that all those things take huge investment. And I'm not sure that companies are going to be making the kind of capital investment necessary in the near term to speed up the adoption of robots and AI.
I mean, does the technology even exist at this point? If those companies had the capital ready to go, are we even technologically there yet to really push it to that point?
So, it's interesting. People think about robots and, look, robots started in the workplace in like the 1970s, and they basically started as robotic arms in manufacturing processes. And those arms could do three things. They could paint, they could weld, and they could pick things up. Those are the three things the robotic arms can do. Now, robots have gotten obviously a lot smarter, have gotten a lot more agile, have gotten a lot cheaper as time has gone on. And people look at the manufacturing sector, which is the first place where those robotic arms appeared, and they see that employment in manufacturing peaked in the United States at 20 million jobs in 1980, and we currently sit at about 12 million jobs. So it is a 40% reduction in the manufacturing workforce in the United States, mostly driven by robots, right? Robots have done the repetitive high volume tasks on a manufacturing line. So, and as people think about robots being able to come into other industries, being able to do a host of things, and eventually come into the home, they think about the fact that robots are getting smarter, and they currently are. They're getting more agile, meaning they can walk around. We've all seen videos from Boston Dynamics of dogs doing backflip, robotic dogs doing backflips, and they are getting cheaper. All those things are 100% true. All of those things are happening. But it's important to remember, to your point, that robots remain incredibly expensive, incredibly clumsy, and incredibly dumb. And the idea that we're going to have Rosie Jetson in our living rooms performing our tasks is literally laughable. Like, it is not going to happen anytime in the near term future. Our projection period is the next 20 years. As much as I would love someone here doing the repetitive high volume tasks that I didn't have to, that is just not going to happen.
So for companies, as they are looking 20 years out in front of themselves and trying to figure out, what this revolution is going to look like and feel like for them, I would have to imagine there are some, hurdles and challenges that majority of companies will face in that. Do you see that? Are there themes, sort of standard sets of challenges or hurdles that companies need to be preparing themselves for or thinking about planning around when it comes to responding to sort of this advancement and more robots and AI being a part of the work that they do?
So short answer is without question. And then the sub answers get pretty complicated. I mean, look, it is very difficult to tell how all of this will play out. We can look at history, and again in history, every single time when you talk about the age of mechanization, which we all talk about as the first industrial revolution we all remember from school, or the age of electrification, or the age of computerization, all known as industrial revolutions, which is why a lot of people call the robots and AI the fourth industrial revolution. In the book, I talk about it as the first services revolution, and I won't waste time on the podcast going into why. But regardless, we've been here before, and companies and workers and societies have had to adjust. And again, every time there have been people saying, oh, well, companies are going to no longer need workers. They can do all their jobs with machines. And every time those people have been wrong. Every time we've ended up with more jobs, with a higher standard of living. And every time society's been better off. But what I wouldn't pretend is that those transitions are off. I wouldn't pretend that those transitions were easy. They were not through the first three industrial revolutions. These are literally times where there is blood in the streets. I mean, this is revolutions in Europe. And so the transition is not easy, and it won't be easy for companies. I mean, workers do transition poorly. Companies do transition even worse. And society does transition worst of all. And so these transition points are going to be difficult, and there are a lot of different things to think about, company to company, industry to industry, but to not prepare for the changes in your workforce and the retraining that you'll have to do, to not prepare for how you can utilize robots or cobots, where they're co-working with your teams, and robots is a catch-all term to include AI software, to not think about the changes that you will have to do for your work, co-working with your teams, and robots is a catch-all term to include AI software, to not think about the changes that you will have to do for your workforce planning would be foolish, because these changes are coming, and they are coming quickly.
A lot of our audience are going to be HR and talent acquisition leaders, and you touched heavily there talking about workforce planning and sort of the workers' experience. In your opinion, what can our HR leaders, what can our talent acquisition leaders be doing themselves to help their companies and really help their workers through this change? Because I suspect it's going to require, a lot of their input and a lot of their participation.
So it's a tough question because it differs so much company to company, industry to industry. And we can talk through a few examples in a moment. But what I would say is, the idea that companies have taken somewhat of a step back, certainly not true for all companies, but the data would show overall that companies have taken a step back from their safety net. And, when people talk about safety nets, Courtney, it's important to remember there are three safety nets. There's the government safety net that we know about as welfare and long-term disability and unemployment insurance, workers' comp. There is the company safety net, the healthcare you get from your company, 401k contributions and things like that. And certainly in a company safety net, the training and development companies have done. And then there's your personal safety net, your personal savings, the payments you make for healthcare, and the training and development dollars you allocate to yourself. And increasingly, over the last 30 years, companies have retreated from the company safety net. The defined benefit pension plan became the defined contribution plan, became a 401k contribution plan, became a 401k with match. The amount that employers are contributing to their healthcare while their costs for the employers are going up, the percent matched or the percent given has, again, over the US economy reduced. And so companies are taking that step back. There's the great example of a company whose name I couldn't use in the book, where they used to do 2 weeks of training per year for each employee down at their quote unquote university in Tampa. And they closed that university in Tampa about 15 years ago. And now every employee needs to do 40 hours of online training on their own time. And so you're seeing that shift away from the company safety net. So what I would say is to start reimagining that company safety net, specifically along the lines of training, and to think about dual training, which is something that is so, take calls from other types of people, not, they could be an internal call center as opposed to an external call center. JP Morgan went through a whole process where their bank tellers were given very quick training to become online customer support people. And so when the branches open back up, they'll go back to being tellers, but they were cross-trained. Mm-hmm. And so what is certainly something that a lot of people talk about in the future of work is this idea of lifelong learning. And what is unknown is where that learning is going to come from. Is it going to be a part of a corporate model? Will it fall in the corporate safety net? Will it be a part of the personal safety net where everyone needs to think about their own lifelong learning and joining online courses? Will it be a part of the government safety net where education will go not just from up to 12th grade, but there will be continuing education provided by the government? I don't know, but I would say that the company is the best place to do it. And so to think about how you're going to be creating a lifelong learning model to retrain, to cross-train your workers is something that'll become a hallmark of the future of work.
When you think about, what company, like sort of this safety net, as you talk about, and the need to focus around that training, to me, my initial gut reaction as you were talking through that was that it really, there's that sort of mutualness that needs to be there in the sense that, yes, I need my company to do it. It's kind of a little bit surprising to hear that, the example you shared of a company who closed down their university and then asked their employees to do 40 hours on their own time. I don't know the role, so maybe it makes sense in that space, but so I do think there's some personal responsibility in keeping your skills fresh and learning new skills and cross training. But I think you're right. I think there is a piece of that is, inherently should be owned by the company. Mm-hmm. Do you see though that there is a piece that the government would be in there? You mentioned them as potentially, you know, as their additional training past grade 12. And I think that's very different than how we've sort of positioned ourselves for a long time in mindset. I mean, do you see that being a likely space where there would be greater sort of government training and development beyond what we see today? Or is it necessary? Do we need to push ourselves to be thinking that direction?
So there are two things that I talk about in the book that are relevant here. One is, you know, as we look through history, the balance of power between companies and workers ebbs and flows, and the introduction of a new technology tends to push things towards companies in that balance of power. And there are usually three counterbalancing forces that help workers gain balance back. One of them is unions, another is the government safety net, and the third is regulation. And so the thing that comes to mind is that, you know, the regulatory system is ours to choose, which is kind of the second point, right? Like, we don't know how this future will unfold, but it is going to unfold within a democracy, and we get to choose the men and women that represent us, and they get to choose the kinds of policies that we want to put in place. So do I think the government will become the educator of choice here? No, I think that is an unlikely scenario. Do I think that you could see regulations around when you're doing layoffs, you have to provide retraining grants and maybe the infrastructure to do a retraining? Yeah, I think that is possible. I think companies are very well positioned to do it. And there are certainly new technologies that are emerging that make it ever cheaper and ever more engaging. I mean, look, one of the great failures that we've had in this country over the last 30 to 40 years are those manufacturing workers. Those 8 million workers, 8 million families that were so impacted by the loss of jobs in the manufacturing sector in the United States. And we did not, as a society, do enough to retrain those workers because jobs were there for those workers. And so some of them obviously took it upon themselves to do some retraining. Obviously, some retraining was done through the companies that had to let them go. And, you know, there were some grants provided, but we didn't do enough. And if we don't do that, as we look at the future of work, that to me is the big doom of the Skynet scenario, as people like to say, where the robots and AI, I don't think, again, will take that many jobs. But we will have a number of jobs lost, because my statement is we will have very little net jobs lost. 10 to 15% of jobs are going to go. That is, you know, 25 million workers that are going to be impacted. And if we don't provide the mechanisms for them to efficiently retrain, to efficiently get to the places and the industries in which there are jobs, that is a very, very bad scenario for society, because we will create enough jobs, but they will not be in the same industries. They will not involve the same skill sets. And so that to me is kind of the doom of Skynet, not robots taking all of our jobs. If you look at the data, that seems highly unlikely, but the jobs that are lost need to be replaced and we need to retrain those people to the jobs that are created.
So earlier you mentioned that, you know, what we were talking about from a revolution perspective wasn't something that was in our immediate future, and it was much more, you know, maybe 20 years down the road. And I'm curious, what is it? Is there a reason that you think 20 years is sort of the pivotal mark when we might really be facing that future of work as you're describing it?
So, you know, I always remember kind of the 5 most dangerous words in business are this time it is different. One of my great takeaways from business school, because it's mostly not different. It's mostly not different. Now, that being said, there are some things that are going to be different about this technological change, this 4th industrial revolution or first services revolution. One of them is that it will happen globally, right? This is not, you know, the textile mill being perfected in Cromford, England, and then slowly making its way and then slowly localized to Lowell, Massachusetts, where the textile industry in the United States, that area where it began.
Mm-hmm.
This is all changes in all industries happening all over the globe at once.
Yeah.
And so that is different. What is also different is the speed of technological adoption. And I'm sure you and your listeners have seen, these curves of the first 50 million telephone users. It took 62 years. The first, 50 million, personal computers. It took 20 years. 20 years. But the first, 50 million users of Facebook took 3 years. The first 50 million, users of Instagram took 1 year. The first 50 million users of Pokemon Go took 9 days. And so there's a compression in the acceptance of a new technology and the means in which we use a new technology. I mean, look, Pokemon Go was able to get to 50 million users in 9 days and 100 million users in like 12 days.
Yeah.
Because it's on our phone. It was very easy to just download the app and go. Right? Like the infrastructure for adopting the new technology existed. The same is true if, Apple comes out with a new, amazingly advanced version of Siri that can do a host of things for us. It is literally 24 hours for that to be on 1.5 billion devices around the planet.
Yeah.
And so those infrastructure, in the case of the second industrial revolution, and maybe 35 to 40 in the case of the third industrial revolution, this one will be 20.
Yeah. I mean, that 20 seems like not actually a really long amount of time in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't feel like it's so far off in the future, but I know that a great deal can change. I mean, I know it realistically it is, it's still 20 years. Outside of like sort of the obvious ones, are there industries you think are going to get there faster? I mean, and when I say obvious ones, certainly like the tech space, they're sort of already in that mindset. When you think about other industries, who's going to be leading the pack and making these advances?
So we do go in the book, which specific jobs and which functions, you have to think about, and these are the key words, repetitive high volume tasks. So places, industries, companies, jobs that have a lot of their component tasks that are repetitive high volume tasks get replaced. And that's why the manufacturing sector was the first place that lent itself to automation, because that production line is a series of repetitive high volume tasks, the same task over and over and over again. And if it is a repetitive high volume task, it will be done by a robot. So you can think about things like data entry.
Mm-hmm.
You can think about things in the transportation sector, in the retail sector, in the food service industry. But then think about these two very important examples. The first is the waitstaff example, and the second is the ATM. So let's start with the waitstaff. The reality, Courtney, is that the technology to displace every waiter and waitress in the United States of America, 4 million people, all of whom right now are obviously out of jobs as restaurants are closed all around the country. But God willing, opening up soon all across the country, and I believe have started to open up in places.
Mm-hmm.
The technology to replace them has existed for 10 years. Right? You did not need to have a human hand me a piece of paper with everything that you offer, me to then communicate verbally to that human who writes down on another piece of paper what I want to order, then walks that piece of paper into a kitchen to give it to another human to prepare my food. You could have had an iPad on the table when I sat down. I could have just clicked through and said, yes, this, but no mayo, boom. And that could have just been sent digitally into the kitchen. And yet, very few restaurants did it, right? And there's something about the cost-benefit analysis around that. But there's another thing around the human nature of that interaction, of that waiter coming over and saying, hey, how you guys doing? Of that waitress saying, oh, you know what, I really recommend this for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there is something about it that means it will be slow, even though the pure analysis of it says, oh, all waiters and waitresses should go in the next 5 years. They will not even close, not even close. And another thing that brings that home is the ATM. So this is one of my favorite examples from the book. What we'll talk about is that the ATM was invented on September 2nd, 1969. Rockville Center, first ATM was put in by Chemical Bank. It wasn't until the 1990s that the ATM as we know it appeared in every bank branch in the United States. At that time, there were 500,000 bank tellers in the United States of America. Do you have any idea what it is people predicted when the ATM came about? What do you think they predicted about those 500,000 bank tellers?
Oh, that they would be out of work overnight.
Out of work. Why do I need a bank teller? Right? This robot performs that function. Do you know any bank tellers are employed in the United States? We'll always say pre-COVID because the data right now is obviously a mess.
I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to guess, but I'm guessing more than 500,000.
You are, based on the framing of the question. That is an intelligent guess. It is 600,000. There were 600,000 bank tellers in 2019. Now, what happened was not the very simple analysis. Oh, well, bank tellers take in cash and they give out cash. The machine does that. Therefore, I don't need bank tellers. Mm-hmm. Bank teller moved out from behind the glass. The bank teller was given an iPad. The bank teller was upselling investment products and car loans and mortgages, investment products and car loans and mortgages. And so the bank teller was able to be upskilled and perform incremental tasks because the repetitive high volume task of the bank teller, the taking in cash and giving out cash, moved to a machine. Now, what also happened is we had banking deregulation in this country. And we went from bank branches every now and again to a bank branch on every corner, at least where I live in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And so the number of bank branches almost doubled in the United States. But the number of tellers per branch went from 21 to 13. And so there was a reduction in the number of bank tellers per branch, but the number of branches increased. And so all of this is to say that anybody that says, oh, well, because of this, then that, it belays the massive complexity. It includes things like a cost-benefit analysis on the engagement of robots, like the human interaction that your customers still want, the regulatory environment, the competitive environment, new technologies that are not necessarily robotics, but online banking in our ATM example. All of these things impact employment of tellers in the United States of America, not just simply, oh, there's a robot that performs a task, therefore we don't need them anymore. And so it's something that, when you asked earlier, oh, what recommendations for companies and this, and I said, well, it's really complicated because this is a complicated issue. And again, this is what led me to write the book, is people making very simple predictions based on very limited amounts of data with no historical context that just doesn't have a high degree of accuracy or a high percentage of chance of being right. If you want a high degree of accuracy in your prediction and how the data unfolds over time, that is what helps us make predictions about the future, not a simple statement of, oh, now that we have ATMs, we don't need bank tellers, because that statement's almost never true.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you bring up predictions, because I did want to chat with you, ask you about the prize, the Future of Work prize competition that you have, because you actually asked people to make predictions. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I found it really interesting, and I'm actually very curious to have a chance to read those submissions and see what the different folks are saying about the future of work.
You're hitting on chapter 10. It's my favorite chapter. And it is my favorite chapter because I didn't have to write it. So I encourage every aspiring author out there to come up with their version of chapter 10. So here's what happened. I mean, look, I am smart enough to know that I don't know that much. And here's what happened. I mean, look, I am smart enough to know that I don't know that much. And the more people you can ask for a solution to a problem, the better off you're always going to be, in my opinion. And so I've had the good fortune over the 10 years of running Work Market up to and past its sale to ADP 2 years ago, of getting to know a lot of leaders in the world of work, including a lot of people that are actually shaping our future of work. They're the ones on the front lines making decisions, the heads of HR from major multinational corporations, the heads of staffing firms, heads of unions, former people in the Department of Labor. I mean, just all of these wonderful people. And I asked a bunch of them, would you consider writing a short essay, not edited for any form you want, about what you think the world of work looks like in 2040? And the group of people that said yes were amazing. Now, a lot of them, couldn't meet the deadlines of getting their essay done, which I certainly understand. A few couldn't get permissions from their companies to do it, which I certainly appreciate. But a number did, and we took the 20 best, and I informed them that they are the official participants in the Future of Work Prize, which is, look, they're making predictions about what the world of work looks like in 2040. One of them is going to be the most correct. And so I have personally put up a $10 million prize for whoever's the most correct in 2040. And the people that have written have very, very different points of view, Courtney. I mean, I've got a few writers that paint a very dystopian picture. Not surprisingly, the former head of the largest labor union in the United States is to protect workers. Okay. We have some people that predict a very utopian future, a very rosy Jetson future of, people being able to allocate a lot more time to leisure and to arts and to family, a lot more focus on science and all kinds of wonderful things, because we have to put in so few hours of work to have this amazingly wonderful standard of living. And then I have, one writer that basically wrote, it's going to be the same. It's going to be basically the same. Not that much will change. Everyone should just calm down. And they are, again, leaders of staffing firms, leaders of companies, and regulators, and leading labor attorney in the country. And it is really mind-blowing. And I am so fortunate that they all produced such amazing works. And again, in any format they wanted. I am so fortunate that they all produced such amazing works. And again, in any format they wanted. Some are letters to their kids, letters to their grandkids. Some are short stories of, a day in the life of a person in 2040. Nobody took me up on writing a haiku. I'm like, you just write a haiku. Work great, not happy, me go, whatever. I couldn't come up with one on the fly, but they all just did such a wonderful job, and it is super fun, super exciting to have them as a part of this book.
Well, like I said, I'm really excited to read that because I'm just very curious. And you answer my big sort of question in my head was, how similar were we going to see? Were we going to see a lot of sort of the same thoughts, or was there going to be some variety there? And I'm excited to hear that there's some different views for you. And maybe this is a spoiler alert, and we need to read the book to know. But I mean, where do you land? Is it dystopian, utopian, somewhere in the middle?
Well, before I answer that, I will say there is one common thread with all the writers. And it is basically the answer to the question I'd ask all of them: what advice would you give to somebody just entering the labor force, that they're going to see all of this in real time as their career evolves? And the basic answer was, be ready for constant change.
Yeah.
And the context of being ready for constant change is be ready to constantly reinvent yourself and reinvent your skills. And so this notion of lifelong learning, of moving learning from, our skills-based occupational learning from 18 to 22, which is when we do most of it, to a lifelong model. So I thought that was super interesting. I will tell you, I am firmly in the kind of Skynet versus Rosie Jetson scenario. Skynet is the doom of mankind to end up, based on my analysis of the data, based on my look on historic trends, we are going to end up in a much, much better place. However, I am a realist when it comes to how difficult that transition is going to be. And I don't pretend that we're just going to magically end up in this better place. I am worried about things like populism and nationalism, which are the historic reactions from the workers that are left behind. And those are dangerous trends. Just historically, they are dangerous trends for society as a whole. And so I don't pretend that we don't have to be vigilant. I don't pretend that there isn't a lot of work to do, but I am hopeful about where we will end up.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I am. I know that I am as well. I know that I am as well. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure that everyone knows where and how and when they can get their hands on The End of Jobs.
Well, the book officially launches on June 2nd, 2020. And so it is available wherever books are sold. We were very fortunate thus far to be the #1 book on Amazon in all the HR categories.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been the reaction that I've gotten thus far from people pre-ordering. We'll see what their reaction is once they read it. We are certainly hitting the right tone. And unfortunately, this is a time when the title, The End of Jobs, which again was meant to be ironic, is not wonderful when we have 40 million of our fellow Americans who have lost their jobs over the last 10 weeks. Hopefully we will have more of a V-shaped recovery and those jobs will all come back very quickly. But the reaction as people are wondering about the future of work, wondering how COVID will impact and accelerate some of these trends, and thinking about this framework that I've put forward to thinking about the future of work, that has certainly hit a chord right now. And we've been very fortunate.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I appreciate you joining us today, and good luck with the launch of the book. I know I will be reading it as soon as I can get my hands on it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor to be here with you and with your audience, and stay safe, be well.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, so we have, as you mentioned, so many Americans out of work, right? And then you have a lot of companies, well, with so many remote workers, they could be anywhere in the world, right? Yep. How, if you're the CEO of Company X, a huge multinational, how do you balance out saying, I'm going to outsource a lot of these different jobs, different places, because people can work anywhere, and different places are cheaper than paying them here, versus so many Americans out of work over here? How do you balance that so it doesn't affect your brand and people getting mad at you and stuff like that? I can just imagine that happening.
It is tough. Jim, there's no easy answer to that question. I think what we can do is, as you can probably guess, I'm going to start with some data and some historic trends.
Please.
Right? That's the way I think about these things. So remote work made up 3% of the US workforce pre-COVID. Right now, about 40% of the workforce is working remotely. Think about these things. So remote work made up 3% of the US workforce pre-COVID. Right now, about 40% of the workforce is working remotely, and that has forced companies to put in place the policies and the procedures and the infrastructure to manage remote work at scale. They had not done this before, and so therefore remote work, while it had grown tremendously, it had grown about 100% over a 10-year period, from 1.5% to 3%. Most people predicted prior to COVID that it would grow, another 33% over the next 10 years, get up to about 4%. And so it wasn't that much of an impact. This has changed that dynamic. And now people, myself included, would say about 8% of the workforce is going to continue to work remote. That is an incremental 8 million people that will work remote. So that has a lot of implications. Now, you have the near term where companies are going to continue to have a number of people working remotely because they can't bring everyone back until there's a vaccine. And the great example of that is New York City. You are only allowed to have one person in an elevator. How do I get my workforce to the 50th floor in a building if only one person can go in an elevator at a time. It can't be done. And so buildings are only going to be able to operate at like 10 to 15% capacity. So people are going to remain remote for much longer than people thought. Certainly in New York City and other places where there are high rises and where the majority of people commute taking mass transit, right? I take the subway to work, and ADP does not want me to get on the subway and then come into the office. Right. So they're not opening the offices in New York City. So all that is to say that whatever that natural place is, that 8%, it's going to take us some time to settle back down to the 8%, but that's where I think we're going to end up. That opens up a few possibilities. One is certain talent pools, if you will, that were not able to work in certain industries. And my favorite example is the legal industry, which was one of the last to move all their people remote through this. Yeah. But very much had to, obviously. And now all of a sudden, they are seeing, wow, people can be more productive. And so they are one of the reasons that you will see an increase in the number of people working remote, is that they will now allow some of their team members to work remote. But prior to COVID, remote work in the legal space was virtually zero. And that meant if you needed a flexible work arrangement because of childcare, because of a sick relative, parent, whatever, you couldn't work in that space. You couldn't have a job, not just as a lawyer, but as a paralegal, as a data entry person, as a clerk, as a whatever. Nothing. Now that industry is going to open up to a whole new set of talent. MBA mom being the example everybody points to, now has more opportunities. Those opportunities, to your point, will accrue to people outside of the United States, where certain functions can certainly be performed on a remote basis more than they were prior. So here's where we don't have a lot of data. On the 3% prior, we knew which functions basically could be disaggregated, done by an outsourced firm, and kind of reaggregated, and it just wasn't that much. We don't have data on these other 8 million jobs. Like, it's way too early to tell. And so this is where, when people ask me now, hey, how does COVID impact this? How does COVID impact that? I will say, look, there seems to be the acceleration of existing trends, remote work, robots, concentration of economic power in a few companies, deglobalization. But the reality is we just don't know. And making predictions without data is not always wrong. Sometimes those predictions are right. They just have a low probability of being right. So I don't know is the short. I could have just said, I don't know. I don't know. But we need to see what those 8 million jobs are, what their functions are, how much they can be fully disaggregated, because working remote does not mean that the person never shows up to the office. The definition of working remote means that more than 50%, right? And that involves the tax nexus of that person. So more than 50% of the time they don't come to the office. They may come to the office 2 days a week and still be considered a remote worker. And so I'm not sure how many people can be completely disaggregated where you never see them, or once a year or whatever it is, see them and do things like that. So because of that, I don't think that this is going to be a huge, even if it's just 1% of the 5% increase, the 3% to 8%, even if 1% of those jobs can be done, that's 1.6 million jobs. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of families that it'll impact. So even small movements here are very impactful. So we need to be very careful of them.